2 5-wicket hauls in just 17 games of T20 cricket, the fastest to do so in full member playing nations in T20 cricket history. All of this, he's at the top of his game. He's played just one first class game for Tamil Nadu, and surprisingly enough, he made his IPL debut before he even played for his state Tamil Nadu in T20 cricket. And when you look up Varun Chakravarthy and you pull his profile on ESPN Cricket Info, it says that he's a leg break googly bowler, but for all of us who've seen him ball over the years, it's clear that he's definitely not just a leg break bowler. There's a lot more to him. There's a lot of mystery to this bowler, and this is also the case in the current era of T20 cricket, where you see bowlers like Vanindu Hasaranga, you see Mahesh Tikshana, and all of these guys who are just mystery spinners. But what is it that has led to the rise of so many mystery spinners in the current era of T20 cricket, and why wrist spinners have been so successful, and why we're not seeing off spinners dominate the game in the T20 format anymore? To answer this question, of course, it's important to go back to the start of T20 cricket, which was almost exactly 20 years ago on this day in 2005. But before I deep dive into this and I talk about T20 cricket and how it's evolved, I need you to hit that like and subscribe button. Let YouTube know that you're enjoying this video and our content. Let's get right into it. Now, T20 international cricket started off in 2005, and for the first couple of years, not a lot of people really had an idea of how to go about this format. In fact, a lot of people were still figuring out what lines and lengths to bowl, what kind of bowlers are successful, and for the batters, what is the right pace for them to go at. Spin especially was one department that was heavily underutilized, and for a long time, for the first 3-4 years of international cricket, a lot of players were still figuring out how to make best use of spinners in this format, what kinds of lines and lengths they should bowl. And a common notion was that spinners would be easier to target as compared to fast bowlers, simply because of the fact that they were slow bowlers and would bowl those loopy flighted deliveries that could be whacked by a lot of batsmen out of the park. In fact, spin was so heavily underutilized that you'll see it in this table and how spin progressed in the T20 format in World Cups itself. In the 2007 T20 World Cup, in the entire tournament, there were only 4 overs of spin that were bowled in the power plays. And overall, just 237 overs of spin were bowled in that tournament, whereas 737 overs of fast bowling were bowled in 2007 T20 World Cup. Of course, this got slightly better as the years progressed. In the 2009 T20 World Cup, we did see 30 overs of spin being bowled in the power plays, and that number went up to 71 overs in the power play come the 2010 T20 World Cup. I'm going to be splitting this analysis into 2 decades, the first being 2005 to 15 and the second being 2015 to 25. The first period of T20 cricket was rather funky, with Pakistan playing the most number of T20 games and the Sena countries following them closely. In fact, if we pull up the 10 highest wicket takers in the T20 format for this first decade, you'll see that there's an even split between the spinners and the fast bowlers. 2 sets, that is 1 set of 5 spinners and 1 set of 5 fast bowlers, that are featuring in this top 10 list. And from here, if we magnify this further into looking at the top 10 spinners, something very interesting comes up. Now, on this list of top 10 spinners, there is only one wrist spinner in Shahid Afridi. Everyone else on this list is a finger spinner. Of course, Sunil Narayan and Ajanta Mendes stand out in this because they're not exactly finger spinners or wrist spinners. They come somewhere in between. They had the variations to ball the carom ball and all of that, and so we've put them in the mystery spinner category. But apart from that, most of these bowlers were traditional off spinners, right from your Nathan McCullums to the Graham Swans. All of these bowlers, even Daniel Vittori, very orthodox off spin bowlers or slow left arm bowlers. And contrary to popular belief, spinners tended to dominate this format and were better than fast bowlers, especially when you look at these top 10. Most of them had an economy rate of under 7. In fact, Sunil Narayan and Daniel Vittori had economy rates of just 5.7. But at the same time, let's not get fooled by their economy rates, because at this time in the world, a lot of people were still figuring out T20 format, and in fact, the highest strike rate for any team was just 130, which was Australia. A lot of the team had their average player strike rates between just 110 and 125, as you'll see in this list. And so the first thing that we want to think about is what separated the off spinners or the finger spinners from the rest of the spinners that made them take so many wickets. Was it just the fact that they were bowling a lot better, or was it the fact that the batters were looking to attack these guys a lot more? Because it is common notion that a finger spinner is much easier to take on than, say, a fast bowler or even a wrist spinner. We pulled up the list of top strike rates for batters against off spinners or finger spinners, and we also looked at the kind of dismissals and how often they were getting dismissed against these kind of bowlers. And of course, the first thing that catches your eyes is that the strike rates here aren't particularly high. The highest strike rate for a batter against a finger spinner is Glenn Maxwell, who's got a strike rate of just 168. If you look at it in modern terms, this feels very low, but for the time, this was pretty high. In fact, it was the highest against the finger spinners. But one thing that I've also highlighted here is how often these batters would get dismissed against finger spinners. And in addition to this, we also wondered how these batters fared against leg spinners and what the top strike rates against leg spinners were and how often were batters getting dismissed against them. And if you look at this table against leg spinners and how the top batters have fared, it might come as a surprise to see Virat Kohli heading the charts here, but that's how good he used to be against spin. He's only been dismissed twice, and even the general trend of top batters against leg spin shows that the strike rate might have been a lot lesser than against off spin, but they also haven't got dismissed as much. In fact, if we look at the dismissals by percentage, batters have got dismissed against off spinners 44.2% of the time. When you compare that to leg spinners, this number goes down to 20.7%. There might be a couple of reasons for this. The first being, if you look at the IPL that started in 2008, something that you'll see in the top wicket takers list for the spinners will always show you leg spinners on top. You'll see the likes of Shane Warne, Amit Mishra, Piyush Chawla, all of these guys dominating and also having extremely good economy rates. And I feel like somewhere, because of how big IPL was getting in those years and the kind of impact and how the world was looking at these bowlers and these games, it meant that the leg spinners were almost able to create this bad hangover sort of effect for the batters, where the batters felt that there was a certain amount of risk in taking on these wrist spinners. Now, what this led to was, of course, decreased strike rates, because the batters did not want to take on the leg spinners when they knew that there were off spinners or fast bowlers who they could get runs off more easily. And so you'll also see the case that despite leg spinners getting a lot of wickets in these domestic leagues, that did not translate in the international format for the first decade, because batsmen were just a lot more secure and a lot more cautious while playing these leg spinners. Now, all of this stuff that we looked at was only T20 international cricket. We've managed to establish that the off spinners or the finger spinners were the more potent bowlers in terms of getting wickets. They were also targeted more, and the fact that wrist spinners or leg spinners were treated with a lot more respect, and it was tougher to get runs off them. But what if we look at the T20 leagues around the world during this period and see if there is any change in this trend? And this is where we pull up the top 10 wicket takers in domestic franchise leagues all around the world. Something that also is a hypothesis of mine is that spinners who are able to turn the ball both ways have generally been higher wicket takers than spinners who can just ball their stock delivery, and this is also extremely evident in this list itself. If you have a look at this list, everyone has a variation delivery, something that we've also put down either as a dusra or a googly. Apart from all of these variations, only Shakib Al Hasan and Pragyan Oja are the players who stand out without a defined variation delivery. Of course, we do know by watching all of their footage that these were bowlers who also had a straighter one and would often undercut the ball, something we'll also get to a little later. And this covers the first generation of hypothesis, where we've talked about how spinners who can turn the ball both ways might be more potent. And logically speaking, it obviously makes sense that a player who can turn the ball both ways will be tougher to bat against, because most batters who can't read the delivery of the hand will have a tough time playing these spinners itself. Also, it will be tougher for them to attack these batters. Now, this is a very important part and something that we'll also get back to in the end of the video itself. Now that we've established the data on spinners in the first decade, it's important to move to the next decade and see how the trend has changed when it comes to spinners who are getting wickets. But before that, I'd also like to establish the period around 2012-2013, talk about it a little bit and the kind of trends that were starting to emerge all around the world in domestic T20 leagues. Now, if you'll remember back to IPL 2012 or 2013, this was the time where a lot of spinners were being used firstly to open the bowling with the new ball, and even in that, some players like Samuel Badri stand out, who were wrist spinners who were getting to ball with the new ball and were making inroads consistently. Now, this was also not to a next generation of spinners, something that we'll also talk about a little later, but this was a time where a lot of young wrist spinners were getting pushed from domestic cricket straight into the IPL. I can think of Rahul Sharma, Yuzurvendra Chahal, Kuldeep Yadav, Karan Sharma, all of these guys getting a nod ahead, getting picked up very early by scouts and franchisees, and the stocks of a lot of experienced spinners like Brad Hogg, Shane Warne and Imran Tahir suddenly started rising, and a lot of teams were fighting to get these wrist spinners in their side. And now a lot of people here may say that this is the case only for the IPL and Indian pitches, but that's definitely not true. Even in the Big Bash League, you saw the likes of Stuart McGill, Brad Hogg, Shane Warne, these guys dominating and being in the top wicket takers for spinners. And from here, just like we looked at the first generation of top wicket takers in T20 cricket, we do the same for the next decade, that's 2015 to 2025, and you'll see that it's starting to tilt a bit in the favor of the spinners. As opposed to the first list where you had 5 and 5 spinners and fast bowlers, this time you have 6 spinners and 4 fast bowlers in this list. In fact, even the next 3 out of 5 players on this list for highest wicket takers are spinners itself. And this is just one of the things that show that the trend was starting to move towards spinners and especially wrist spinners. And clearly the trend of using spinners and getting them to take wickets was being established, especially in this 2015 to 2025 period. From here, very similarly, we'll also look at the top 10 spinning wicket takers for this era, and you'll see something that is very in line with the trend that we observed around 2012-2013. We see in this list that 7 out of 10 spinners here are wrist spinners, as opposed to the first case where there was only one wrist spinner in that first generation featuring in the top 10. Now in this list, you'll see Rashid Khan and Ish Sodhi leading the charts in international cricket. And not only that, but even Vanindu Hasaranga, who's at number 3, I've labeled this man as a mystery spinner because of the way in which he bowls, but technically he too is a leg break bowler. And apart from this entire list that is filled with wrist spinners, there are only 2 bowlers who are finger spinners who stand out in this list. First being Mitchell Santner and the next being Shakib Al Hasan. Once again, if you look at these two, they're left arm spinners. And that means that this list does not feature a single off spinner who bowls with the right hand. In fact, if I looked at the top 20 list, there were only 3 off spinners who featured in the highest wicket taker list. This is a stark contrast and a jump from the first generation where there were 10 off spinners in the top 20 wicket takers. And so the question that arises is what happened to these off spinners, especially the bowlers who were bowling right arm off break? Was it just the fact that wrist spinners were being favored and so the off spinners went out of fashion, or is there a lot more to this? Now, exactly like we looked at the top strike rates of batters against off spinners as well as leg spinners, we'll do the same thing for this generation. Firstly, pulling up the off spinning numbers, you'll see that the strike rates have gone up drastically. In fact, it's almost a case where the last person on this list would have been the first person in the 2005 to 15 era. The strike rates, of course, in T20 cricket have gone up drastically, the highest on this list being 218 against an off spinner. And if you pull up the list for top strike rate against leg spinners, you'll see that this number too has gone up a lot, but not as much as it has for off spinners, and still we can say that leg spinners are the better bowlers in terms of the economy with which they bowl. However, there is one major point of difference, something that I've also highlighted here, is the dismissals themselves. As opposed to earlier where the off spinners were getting a lot more wickets, that is definitely not the case. In fact, that number has come down to 33.5%. Whereas if we look at the wrist spinners, this number has gone up almost 10%, now sitting at 29.3%. And the simple inference from this is the fact that off spinners are getting attacked a lot more, being taken to the cleaners, but they're not getting as many wickets as they used to. Whereas in the case of wrist spinners, they've started to get more wickets and they're not giving as many runs as their off spinning counterparts. And there's a couple of points that we can look at that talk about what could have possibly changed and why the reason for this shift in spinners is. Now, the first thing and a very common theory is the simple fact that there are just much less left-handed batters than there are right-handed batters. And the same goes with spinners as well. It's very common to find a right arm off spinner, and in a lineup that is filled with a lot of right-handed batsmen, it's obvious that they will take these bowlers on because of the simple fact that the ball is coming into them, and anyone who's played cricket would know that it's much easier to hit the ball that is coming right into you. A finer technical detail to this would be that when it comes to big hitting, batters like to make use of their bottom hand, and it's just easier to hit when the ball is coming into the batter because the bottom hand is able to take charge completely. Apart from this, a lot of off spinners today do not have the doosra in their artillery, and this is also because of the toughness of bowling the doosra without bending your elbow itself. We've seen that even in the previous generation, there were a few bowlers who could bowl the doosra, but a lot of these bowlers had their action come under scrutiny by the SEC for chucking. The second reason, of course, is that because of the trend that we were seeing in 2012 and 13, a lot of bowlers might have grown up watching this and tried to pick up leg spin much earlier and to tailor the game in such a way that it would suit T20 cricket. In fact, there is a very interesting article on this by Akash Chopra, and it makes some really good points. The first one being that the modern wrist spinner is a lot different than the wrist spinner of the previous generation. If we think back to the Shane Warnes and the Stuart McGills, they were a lot less high arm as compared to the leg spinners of today. In fact, a lot of leg spinners today are more quicker through the air, they're more accurate instead of being loopy spinners like the Shane Warne era. In fact, a lot of these spinners are very similar to Anil Kumble's school of leg spin, where they look to hit the right lines, they ball quicker through the air, and they have a much higher arm action. But why is that important and what does this really do? The first thing it does is it makes their googlies a lot more potent. Because of the fact that these googlies are coming at a much faster pace, and the fact that they're coming from a much higher arm action and are balled more accurately, means that the batter is going to have a tougher time negotiating against these, especially when they're looking to attack and hit through the line of the ball. Not only that, but from a technical standpoint, there is one more thing that happens, and this is overspin. What happens with the high arm action is that wrist spinners are not able to impart much side spin on the ball. Instead, they release the ball from a higher arm action, which means that the ball is more likely to have overspin, something that we've also covered in a previous video. But just to tell you briefly, what overspin essentially means is that the ball moves forward or rotates forward instead of coming out sideways. And what this does is it creates something called dip. Now, put very simply, what dip means is that the ball tends to fall a little before on the pitch as it is actually supposed to. For example, if a ball is supposed to fall around the 4-meter mark, it might just fall at the 4.2-meter mark, a 20-centimeter difference, because of the overspin and dip that is being created. Indian analyst Himanesh Ganju has also put out a lovely article on this, talking about the impact of dip on strike rates for spinners itself. He's looked at data from 2017 to 2024 in the IPL, and this is the graph that you'll see that shows a stark difference in strike rates for various speeds and lengths at which the spinner is bowling at. And it's not just for a particular speed or a particular length, but you'll see that throughout this graph, strike rates have improved for bowlers who are able to extract dip on the spinning ball. And the last thing that we can look at is our hypothesis on whether or not bowlers who can turn the ball both ways are a lot more potent as compared to bowlers who only have a stock ball. And for this, we again look at all the franchisee leagues around the world and the T20 cricket being played. If we look at the list of the top 10 wicket takers here, you'll see something once again that immediately stands out. On this list, everybody other than Imad Wasim and Shakib Al Hasan have some sort of variation that helps them spin the ball the other way. With the leg spinners or wrist spinners, you have them being able to ball a googly, whereas with the likes of someone like Sunil Narayan, who's a bit of a mystery spinner, he has that carom ball going for him. And so to summarize, this second generation of spinners has been one that has been dominated by the wrist spinners and bowlers who can turn the ball in both ways. But this has happened not only because of the changing trend in franchisee leagues all around the world with them favoring wrist spinners, but also because of the fact that traditional off spinners are slowly but surely going out of fashion. Because of the fact that the game is gravitating towards T20 cricket, even traditional off spinners are not masters of their craft, so to speak. Someone like an Ashwin, who is a traditional off spinner, has all those variations, but is still good enough just with his off spin to be able to get wickets. And this is because he's mastered the traditional art of being able to use side spin or overspin or get dip on the ball or also a little bit of drift. That is not something that is very common in a lot of the off spinners that we see today. And a basic understanding that we can establish thus far in 20 years of T20 cricket is that off spinners or finger spinners are the bowlers who are taken the most to the cleaners. They are bowlers who are a lot easier to target than their wrist spinning counterparts. Apart from that, obviously something that we've spoken about is how bowlers who can turn the ball both ways are a lot more potent. And lastly, the bowlers who are skilled enough to get dip on the ball, to get overspin on the ball, are a lot more likely to have lower strike rates and to be able to get wickets consistently. And together, all of these observations, hypotheses, and the data itself brings us back to Varun Chakravarthy. Not only Varun Chakravarthy, in fact, but a lot of the mystery spinners of this generation. I can think of some other mystery spinners like Hasaranga, Mujibur Rahman, or even Mahesh Tikshna for that matter. These are all players who growing up would have modeled their action and their bowling styles in a way that would have suited limited overs cricket, which meant that they would have obviously been able to bowl variations other than just their off spinner or leg spinner itself. And something that you'll also see in these mystery spinners is that a lot of them are leg break googly bowlers, because it is much easier to bowl a leg break with your fingers, because with the same action you can also bowl seam up deliveries. And now with Varun Chakravarthy, you are also seeing the use of a side of the hand googly itself. This is a lot easier than being an off spinner and then working on something like the carom ball or the doosra itself, because these are a lot harder to execute, and it's very likely that the bowlers might not have the pace or the accuracy when they're bowling these deliveries. Not only that, but it'll also be easier for them to get a little bit of overspin because of the high arm action when they're bowling with the leg spinner's grip itself. And basically it's this, right? The evolution of T20 cricket has seen batters just go from strength to strength. A lot of the places and a lot of the franchise leagues are those that favor batters, and the format itself is slightly tilted to the batter's advantage. In such tough conditions, it already is going to be very tough to be a bowler, let alone a bowler who has just one kind of delivery. And so it becomes important for these bowlers to develop variations that can be used against the batters. Not only that, because a lot of batters look to hit big shots, a lot of times they're reading the ball off the length itself and not the line of the delivery. This means that even if the bowler has the ability to straighten the ball or to be able to turn it just enough in the opposite direction, they become extremely potent and can get those wickets. And because of all of these things, T20 cricket is responsible for mystery spinners like Varun Chakravarthy coming into popularity and doing so well. Traditionally, you would never see these kind of spinners being encouraged, but because of how the game has evolved, it has become imperative for franchisees all around the world to recruit these bowlers, even if they don't have any first class experience, even if they've just played T20 cricket, but show the skill of being able to turn the ball both ways and use their brain. This has been our video on the evolution of spinners in T20 cricket, why someone like a Varun Chakravarthy and other mystery spinners are relevant today, and how the trend of spinners has changed across these 2 decades. If you like this video, definitely comment down below what your thoughts are. Share this with your friends, hit that subscribe button. Most importantly, let YouTube know that you're enjoying our content. All of our links and socials are in the description below. We also have an email newsletter, so if you haven't signed up for that, definitely do it. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.